Welcome to this tutorial brought to you by River City Graphics. Today I'll be showing you how to create a MySQL database and table using phpMyAdmin. So before I get started, I just wanted to mention that this is not the only way to create a MySQL database and table. You can do the same thing by creating a PHP file with the necessary code, and then if you run it on your server, it will create it. So I just want to tell you I just prefer this way because I think it's a lot easier to visualize. So to get started, if you downloaded XAMPP in the last tutorial, you're going to want to run the top two, and then you want to go to localhost /phpMyAdmin. And once you're there, you're going to want to log in. The username for this one is root, and then we're going to say test123, which was the password that I created. Alright, so now that we're inside, I just want to make a point. If you aren't using XAMPP, then on your web hosting, then you're going to be able to find this by going to your control panel, and then you find the little phpMyAdmin icon and click on that, and you'll be able to log in there, provided that you actually have phpMyAdmin for your web hosting. So the first thing we need to do is create a new database. So you can see this little box here. You'll create a database, and we'll say test_database. And then just leave this as a default and create that. So now you can see it's over here in the databases, and then it wants you to create a table on this database, and we're just going to be making like a mock members database or table. So we're going to say members, and then we'll give it 7 fields and click go. So I just want to make a point. Basically, I'm going to be showing you how to make I'm going to be explaining it in terms of members, just so that you can kind of get an idea of how each of these might play into what you're actually doing. This isn't like a practical, I mean it is practical, but it's not, we're not actually going to be using this for the database itself, but just for explaining it. So the first thing we're going to do is fill out all these fields of things that you might need for information of your members. So for the first thing, we're going to put ID, and I'll explain that in a minute, and then username, sign up date. Alright, and then we'll put, how about email, bio, account permissions. Okay, permissions. And then for the last thing, we'll put email activation. Alright, so for the first thing, the ID is basically, if you were having a member database, you'd want an ID, or if you were doing even a forum database, a blog database, whatever you're doing, you're probably going to want an ID. And basically, it's just a number that gives a specific line of data. So say that you're trying to get all the information on one person. Each person would have their own specific number, and you would say, okay, member number 1, I want all of his information. So you would basically target this field, and then you'd find all of the information based on that. So it's really nice to have this ID just to be able to get stuff really quick. So for an ID, you would want an integer, which is int, and it's just basically a number, and then you would put it at 11 for the value, because it's like the default for integers. So now if we scroll over for an ID, you're going to want to check this AI box. Now the AI box is an auto increment, so basically the first person that signs up is going to have 1, the next person 2, 3, and so on, and it'll just keep incrementing forever until people stop signing up. So for the next thing, we're going to have a username, and for this one we're going to want varchar, and varchar has a default of 255. Now for varchar, it's basically just a number of characters that you can put in. It can be basically anything you put in. It can be code, it can be text, it can be whatever you want to put in. Well, the code is actually text, but just a string of characters that are 255 characters or less. So I mean, you can make this more or less, but this is just the default for that. So varchar is pretty versatile. So for the sign up date, you can see right here you have the top 4 are going to be really frequently used, but I would advise you not to use the date for dates. I would advise you to go down to where underneath date and time and just go to date time and click that. Now the reason that I would say date time over date is because the way that PHP works is you'd submit something to the database, and PHP doesn't determine what is how it is submitted. It submits something like this. You would have date, open, close parentheses, semicolon, and that would actually submit the date to the database, and then the database would say, okay, he wants just the date, so it'll put in the month, the day, the year, and that's if you would have date. Now if you have date and time, it would put in all that plus the time, like down to the second. So the way that you would take it out would be with PHP, and then you'd format it once it's out of the database. And I would much rather have the time in the database to be used later than to not have it and want it later. So that's why I recommend using date time. So moving on, the email, we're going to have another varchar, and we'll just put it at 255. And then for the bio, we're going to be using the text. And basically text, there's a lot of options. If you scroll down, there's tiny text, text, medium text, long text. So if you wanted to have a lot of text, then I'd put long text, but text should hold you off for a while. If you're using forum posts or even like shorter blog posts, that should work for you. So I want to put account permissions. This one's going to be a little interesting. If you go down, you're going to want to select enum right here for enumerated, like an enumerated list. And if we scroll down to the very bottom here, it says if the field type is enum, please enter the values using this format. So I'm just going to copy that format. Alright, scroll back up, and we're going to type that in. And okay, yeah. So I'm also going to do this one real quick. That's what I was debating. We're going to scroll down and do enum for this one, and we're going to paste it. And this one's going to only have 2 values. So we're going to have, instead of A and B, we're going to have 0 and 1. So I'm going to try and explain this at the same time. So for this account permissions one, basically you can select what style account someone has. Now if they have an account A, say you want them to be just a basic member. If they have an account B, then you want them to be able to post certain things. And if they're C, then they're like a super admin. They can delete things, ban people, whatever you want them to do. So based on which letter the person is in the database will depend on what things actually happen in the website. So it's really nice for giving a lot of options within just one field. Now for something like this though, you're going to want to set a default, and you go to it right here where it says default, go to as defined, and then just select the first one, which is A. So that'll be everyone's A, so you make that your basic member, and then you just up them to B or C or D or however far you want, depending on what permissions you want them to have. So for this next one, you're going to want it to be 0. And the way this is going to work is for email activation, and this is a really simple way to do that. Basically, whenever anyone signs up, their email activation is set to 0, as defined for the default. So when they actually click on that link in their email, it'll switch it to a 1, and then they can do whatever on your website that you want them to have their email activated for, which is pretty much logging in, doing whatever, because you don't want somebody that's not activated their email doing stuff, so you want it to make sure it's a 1 and not a 0. So these are just some of the basic ones. For my website, which has all kinds of different PHP and MySQL things, all different kinds of features, I've used these probably the most. There's maybe a couple that out of this entire list that aren't those. So that's why I wanted to make sure and go over those, just because they will be frequently used by you. You can use varchar for pretty much anything. If you wanted to put a varchar instead of an integer, you could. So I mean, they're just really versatile. Just knowing which one to use when is a lot better. So for like integer, number, varchar is just basically other text for things that are longer, date time for any kinds of dates, and these for account permissions, things that will be switched later. So I hope you guys learned something about that. So there's one more thing. For like the bio, if someone didn't sign up and they didn't want to put a bio, which you probably wouldn't have that on your registration. So somebody would sign up and they wouldn't have that. Now you don't want it to put like something else in the database for that. You just want it to put nothing. So you're going to want to click the null on that. Now if they had a website, not everybody's going to have a website, so you'd want to click null on something like that. Just on things like that. So I just wanted to point that out as well. So the next thing we need to do is come down to the very bottom here, and it'll say save or add one field, go. So basically what this is going to do is if you click save, it's going to make your database, and if you click go, then it's going to add one field or 2 fields or however many you want to add to the bottom of this, and then you can put more stuff in. So since we're done, we're just going to click save. And you can see all this code up here. Basically this is what it would look like in the PHP file if you were to do this that way, and that's why you can see there's no drop down menus or anything. It's really hard to tell what you're doing, so that's why I prefer this method better. So basically the table has been created in test database. You can see members here. If you go to just test database, you can see members right here. You click on over here on the members and you can see the structure, and you can change the structure. Say we don't want to have a bio anymore, you can click this little X here to delete it. You can click right here to change something. Say that we wanted to call it bio underscore member. Just click save, and then it changes it to bio underscore member. Now once you have a lot of code written, you probably wouldn't want to do that. You just want to leave it what it is, but you can actually just do that. So a couple other things you can do. You can actually browse your database. If you had data, then you could go through it and it would show it all in these options. Now you can delete these. I showed you that before. If you wanted to delete a database, you can go to databases by clicking just all the way back to the main, go to database, and then you can just delete these however you want by just clicking drop right there. So we probably don't want to do that right now. And basically I think that that's it. You can add additional fields later on. You can edit things. I think I've showed you a pretty good base for using phpMyAdmin to create databases for you to use later on. So I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you guys subscribe, rate, and comment, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.